After 10 straight years of party packs, the Jackbox team is shaking things up. The Naughty Pack dropped just 6 weeks ago and was not well received. I wasn't a fan either, but 25% on Steam is brutal. And now, closer to their annual fall window, we have the Jackbox Survey Scramble. This is a standalone release of one game featuring 4 modes centered around these one-word survey answers. They collected answers from real people, and the game is designed to update based on player responses. So these surveys aren't static. The early consensus as of this morning is that this is a great offering and absolutely a step in the right direction for the future of Jackbox. I am mindfully following their lead of referring to it as 4 modes, not 4 games the way it would be in a party pack. But it's been priced accordingly. This is launching for only $10, and as with all Jackbox games, only one person needs to own it for you to still have the full multiplayer experience locally or online. Every mode is made for 2 to 10 people, with up to 10,000 in the audience if you're streaming. While this is a proper full launch review, it may quickly become outdated for 2 reasons. The main is that they plan to release additional game modes before the year's end. Perhaps they should have experimented with early access if that was their plan, or just waited until the end of the year to release this. It kind of feels like they're forcing the release at this time to meet their typical October release window. The second reason this might grow outdated is due to the live nature of the survey results. I was playing a pre-release version that would have polled only a limited number of people. However, the game asks you to answer survey questions during downtime between games, and inputs made during the actual gameplay are all intended to be fed back into these surveys, meaning the results and rankings will be constantly changing. But I suspect that might be a downside in the long term. Before I get into my criticisms and concerns, I'll start with a summary of the different modes and an overview of this game as a whole. The survey answers are all intentionally kept down to one word, although things like ice cream and peanut butter that could easily be seen as a singular response will often count, so long as enough other people out there answered the survey in that way. All of these surveys are then used for the 4 game modes: high-low, speed, squares, and bounce. Right away we found it surprising that each mode is built to only take about 5 minutes. This game doesn't feature the multiple rounds that are typical of Jackbox games. It seems designed for fairly rapid quick play. You could instead choose the tour mode that queues up all 4 modes back to back, which altogether does feel more like a singular 20-minute Jackbox game you'd find in a party pack, which is why the whole thing is considered one game with 4 modes instead of 4 games. There's a couple of quality of life things here I appreciate, like having a single room code for the entire thing, and having the ability for players to vote on modes, then having a host who can make that selection from their phone rather than standing up and walking over to your computer as I so often do when playing these. Winning a mode will earn you a star, which is tracked throughout the session. It was a fun way to see who is winning the overall night, not just the individual mode. The downside is that seemingly resets if you finish a tour mode rather than letting the users determine what the cutoff of tracking the stars is. And overall, I thought the presentation of things was very clean, it looks polished, it's nice, I have no complaints there. So let's look at the individual modes. High-low is the first and simplest offering. You are given a topic and have 2 rounds attempting to guess the top answers, then 2 rounds guessing the bottom. The trick is in remaining novel. If you and someone else both guess the same answer, you must split the points, leaving room for someone who guessed a lower ranked answer to pull ahead. There's then this final mini one-off round where you guess which of 2 given responses is higher. Guessing the popular answers was a fun and simple challenge, but guessing the low end was a total crapshoot and is where many of my concerns with the survey scramble land, but as that applies to all of these modes, I'll get into it after. That final comparison round felt like an afterthought. Generally, high-low is short, simple, and fun enough. Speed is a rapid guess free-for-all, trying to submit as many answers on the list as possible. If someone else got to an answer before you, it won't count. You're racing against the clock, with correct guesses adding more time. Every so often, the game takes a pause, raises the value of the points, then starts back up. Everything is up on the screen, who guessed what and where that ranks, but as this is a speed-based game, there's not really any time to look up, and it was instead just a room full of people looking intensely at their phone for 5 minutes. So I guess the visuals are more for the benefit of anyone who might be tuning into a stream. I appreciate it at the end where it tallied how many answers you found and who guessed which first. This mode was fine at best, but it's definitely the most shallow of these modes. Rapid guess answers, that's kinda it. Squares is played in teams and ended up being the real standout for us. You have a tic-tac-toe grid of spaces grouped into ranges. So to claim that top left spot, you need to guess one of the top 2 answers, and the next square over somewhere within 3 to 5, then 6 to 10, and so on. The key here is that guessing the upper limit of that range locks the square. Anything below the max, and the square can be stolen by the other team submitting a higher guess within the range. This was the best part. When you're strategizing your next guess, do you try to start a new line, or do you hope you can sneak in a higher guess to steal a square? If your guess lands below the current value of a claimed square, the submission is rejected and you can guess again as long as time remains. I think that rule will be controversial. I imagine some people would rather see the turn lost, punishing you for failing to find something new, while we found that it kept the game moving nicely, and encourages you to go for those steals as often as possible. Each turn, someone on your team is the designated guesser, while your teammates can submit suggestions that will appear on your phone. It's a handy way for your team to have a bit of table talk and pitch ideas without giving it away to your opponents. This mode was clever, challenging, and some good cooperative fun, followed up by Bounce, the absolute low point of the 4. This is another team mode where you're playing a slow-mo game of Pong, moving your paddle to deflect the ball. With each deflection, the ball speeds up, and if you defend with a reused answer, your paddle shrinks. It was probably smart of them to make it some sort of logarithmic scale, clustering together answers, but it was never explained very well. And some of these numbers are shown to you on your phone, but not in a really useful way. We only played this one twice because it was just kind of frustrating and not at all fun. Half the time you luck out and your paddle's just in the right place already, and once the ball has about 4 bounces worth of speed, it's too fast to actually respond to. This game has that same rotating designated guesser system as Squares, with teammates submitting their suggestions to you. However, that suggestion page closes when it's the opponent's turn, and if you were in the middle of typing a suggestion, it gets deleted. So as soon as the game speeds up, and you're trying to act quickly, your hub of possible answers and suggestions is opening and closing so often as to be utterly useless. Positioning your paddle accurately was far too difficult, and it all just felt a little too chaotic to be any fun. I don't really have anything nice to say about this one. We did not enjoy it. I'm probably not going to play it again. All 4 modes are based around guessing the high and low end of surveys with hundreds of responses. And unfortunately, that basis of the game risks being its biggest weakness. When needing to guess the low end of these surveys, we found that you had the greatest success by submitting nonsense that hardly matched the category. The game will reject answers that aren't on the list, so it's in your best interest to keep risking random guesses until something works. One survey was name something sticky. The high end made perfect sense, but the low end included the likes of grease, oil, and water, things that are distinctly not sticky. The point of the survey isn't to create a ranking of things from least to most sticky. This is Family Feud. The ranking is intended to be based on which answers are most frequently submitted, but the whole thing kinda only works if the answers are actually applicable, rather than being this tightrope of guessing. Trying to think of something minimally sticky that might not be what people first think of, or just a creative, less common answer, the solution was to guess things that aren't sticky at all. I know Family Feud includes brain-dead answers all the time, but they aren't challenging you to root out those garbage answers like this. And my concern is that once this is public and thousands of people are submitting answers being put back into these surveys, the pool will just be further diluted with these fully random responses. One option would be for them to automatically ditch the bottom, 20% of responses. But that doesn't solve the other problem. Seemingly no matter what the question was, some variation on ejaculate or feces made it onto the list, often midway up the list where that bottom 20% rule wouldn't drop it. Because yes, obviously people are going to troll these surveys. Jackbox claims they manually review the lists, but even when only a limited number of people had access to the game, they're already failing miserably at that. But that's not even the only issue. It also felt like people just couldn't agree with what some of the surveys were asking. When I read worthy animal opponent, I picture the classic concept of man versus beast, whether that's hunting or the absurdist idea of them having a pit fight or whatever. The top answers? Cat, ant, mouse, dog, rat. How are those worthy? The survey just turned into a list of the most common animals people can name. And as soon as I realized that, I won by just spraying out farm animals and specific birds. A bunch of domesticated beasts and non-threatening animals that I would consider to be not worthy in any way, shape, or form. And a major concern I have is the fact that these games are going to farm people's guesses and put that back into the results. Because every one of these games requires you to make guesses on the low end, and the best way to perform there is to submit things that don't don't really match the category, the game, by design, is pushing you towards guessing inaccurate answers, meaning this database is going to be constantly flooded with things that don't really fit the survey. It's already on shaky ground pre-release, and I don't see a world where the whole thing doesn't collapse and/or require constant maintenance from the Jackbox team. And the early state of these supposedly curated responses doesn't bode well. If they don't clean up these crappy answers and stay constantly on top of poor submissions, the live element of these surveys is just going to fully deteriorate. I like the idea of turning this into a standalone title, but it currently feels half-baked. I wish they had gone through early access, since they're planning to keep adding to it anyways. The tour mode, as is, makes perfect sense, playing short 5-minute versions of each mode back to back. We started there excited to try each mode, then expecting to move through everything one at a time, playing beefier versions independently. Nope, it's the exact same 5-minute offering given during the tour. Let's take high-low as an example. Why not have multiple rounds, spanning different surveys? Maybe an expanded version of that comparative ranking round. Or give the players a selection of answers and make them attempt to rank them to match the results. They could give Speed an alternate round where correct answers don't block other people, and it's instead a fully independent race for everyone to submit as many correct answers as they can without blocking anyone. Then make their ranked position worth more rather than just points per guess. Squares, much like tic-tac-toe, can run into a deadlock situation, yet the game continues. If everything is in those upper ranges, but no one can come up with the couple of answers needed to win the game with a steal, you will just be fully stuck. So there should probably be a tiebreak of some kind once the board is filled in. Again, it would be simple to do multiple rounds, switching surveys, or stay on topic but remove the correctly given answers from the pool for a second round and force people to get creative. Or have a finisher round where it's literally just the top 9 answers in a grid, no stealing. And honestly, I don't see a good way to improve bounce. I kinda hated it. Why not borrow from other turn-based games like tic-tac-toe instead of something live like Pong? Make a battleship-like mode where teams position their targets and you attack them with squares-like answer placements. Or something simple like tug-of-war, where the higher ranking your answer is, the closer it pulls to your team's side. And if you submit 2 consecutive answers, then it's an even bigger pull. I have no idea what they're planning for the alternate modes beyond these first 4, but I want to see them play around with the data more. You already have and will continue to generate insane amounts of data through this. Why limit that to ranked lists? Give players a word pool and ask them to pick which answers belong to which survey. Take the existing Name Something Sticky survey and make people rank them in A/B tests to generate a wavelength-like list for an alternate mode, closer to how it currently unintentionally behaves. And that's just if they limit themselves to this simple style of survey question. Part of the appeal here is obviously how quick and easy these are to pick up and learn, but they put themselves in a very confined little Jackbox. I'm shocked they didn't pull from their own older survey games. I like espionage more than most. Borrow from that. Take a survey, limit it to the top 20 answers, and make people guess what percentage of the response pool chose each. Reusing those same old mechanics, higher, lower, double down, all of it. Or the poll mine from Jackbox 8, where the surveys are insular and all about your group. If the game is going to ask you to constantly answer survey questions, why not bring back the concept to create an internal pool of answers to play around with? Excluding sequels to either of those 2 survey-based games feels like a major missed opportunity. And as a random aside, now seems like a good a time as any to point out that an old thumbnail of mine is randomly included on their site as a screenshot. Maybe some intern thought that was official? I don't know what's going on there. I don't mind, I just think it's funny. There just feels like a lot left on the table here from an otherwise winning concept. But because they're launching as 1.0 and haven't given a lot of indication of how they plan to expand things, the Survey Scramble just isn't as exciting as I wanted it to be. Quickly here, before my final thoughts, I wanted to talk about Starground. This is an online co-op title published by 2 Left Thumbs. It's also only $10, is currently in early access, and just added mod support. It's directly inspired by the incremental island management of Forager. However, this game is split into 2 parts. You can either work on a giant automated factory at your base, or venture to new planets for some roguelike inspired dungeon crawling. The split gameplay loop feed into each other to keep the game fresh, allowing you to focus on the side of the game that you prefer, and serving as a way to bring together potentially incongruous action versus automation preferences within your own friend group. You will have to buy 1 copy per player, unfortunately, but the game is receiving regular updates and will continue to for the foreseeable future. We'd love your feedback, especially as things get bigger and weirder with the mods. I think that game has the potential to be something really special. Thanks for hearing me out on that. Let's wrap up the Survey Scramble review. Overall, the experience feels a little lacking. I think the $10 price point saves the whole thing. That's cheap enough that I'd still recommend it, and I'm curious where it will go from here. But they're choosing to call this 1.0, and I'll review it as such. The Survey Scramble is roughly the size of 1.5 to 2 games you might find in a party pack. They've promised to expand it. I think they probably should have just waited until it was complete. But considering the live nature of this game, how it's going to take shape alongside the players, I think it really would have benefited from going the early access route. Work out the survey kinks, polish up and expand the existing modes, and ask the community what else they want to see. So even though this game felt tailor-made for my preferences, I'm only gonna give it like a 6 out of 10. Squares is great, high-low is good, speed is fine, and bounce is awful. Yet at $10, I still think it's a pretty safe recommendation. I was really impressed to see them aim that low with the price point. That's perfect for what this is. My main concern is that all of the modes are plagued by the low-end response randomness and the many troll answers that already permeate the game. Depending on how dramatically this changes, maybe it'll warrant a second video where I revisit all of this, but if the changes are as small as I'm expecting, I'll probably just end up pinning a comment to this video with my updated thoughts. I'm really excited that Jackbox is trying new things. I think that's what they need to be doing after a decade. The Naughty Pack was a misstep, and I disagree with how and when this one was rolled out. But I want them to keep playing around in this online multiplayer space in smaller standalone offerings like this, and only doing party packs every few years with more thought and polish behind them. A recent survey was sent out to Jackbox fans, not one that had anything to do with the Survey Scramble, asking questions about gaming preferences, and hinting at what might be coming down the pipe. This survey was centered around Trivia Murder Party and escape rooms, so they clearly plan to bring back that ever-popular series in some form and are seemingly exploring the idea of these beatable escape room-like campaigns. I sincerely hope they do this. If they charged like $15 for a standalone Trivia Murder Party that had a classic mode with some new minigames, an escape room mode that has some randomized puzzles and trivia, and then a small selection of preset, more challenging, larger cooperative escape rooms, I'd be all over that. Updated every so often with new trivia, roll out new campaign escape rooms through DLC, or hell, maybe actually try early access, why not? I've been pretty critical of just about everything Jackbox has put out the last 2 years, but I want them to keep trying and playing around with things. I'm glad they recognize it's time to change, and I hope they're afforded the freedom to keep playing around in this space, just so long as they remember to listen to what people are actually asking for. The Survey Scramble is out now. You'll all have to let me know what you think of it yourselves. Go check out Starground. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.